Get down here now. Jerry's voice exploded from the basement like thunder, rattling the coffee mug in Janet's hands until scalding liquid splashed across her wrist. The tone wasn't anger. It was something far worse, betrayal mixed with disgust, wrapped in a voice she'd never heard from her husband in 32 years of marriage. Janet felt a chill run through her as she set the mug down with trembling fingers. "Jerry?" she called out, but only silence answered back. The basement stairs creaked under her weight as she descended, each step feeling like a march toward her own execution. The harsh fluorescent light made her squint, revealing Jerry standing in the far corner, like a statue carved from pure rage. Cardboard boxes lay scattered around him like the aftermath of a tornado, their contents spilled across the concrete floor. Old photo albums, Christmas decorations, forgotten memories. But it was the small pink book clutched in his white-knuckled fist that made her stomach drop. "Please tell me that's not what I think it is," Janet whispered, though she already knew the answer. Jerry turned slowly, and the look on his face could have shattered glass. His eyes, usually warm and kind, now burned with a hatred so intense it made her take a step backward. "Your diary," he said, his voice barely above a whisper but carrying the weight of a death sentence. "The one where you kept such detailed records of your activities." Janet's mouth went dry. Those diaries dated back decades. She'd completely forgotten about most of them, stored away in boxes she never planned to open again. But Jerry's expression told her exactly which diary he'd found and exactly what he'd read. "Jerry, come on, you know I used to write all sorts of silly nonsense when I was young," she said, forcing a laugh that sounded hollow even to her own ears. "It's probably nothing important." She reached out her hand, hoping he'd just give it to her, hoping they could burn it together and pretend this moment never happened. Instead, Jerry gripped the diary tighter, his knuckles going white. "Nothing important?" His voice cracked like a whip. "Then explain this." He opened the diary to a page marked with a torn piece of paper, his hands shaking as he read aloud. "I wish Jerry would just propose already, but I'm getting so tired of waiting. David is so much more exciting anyway, and oh my God, the things David did to me last night with his—" "Stop." Janet's face burned with shame. "Jerry, please, that was 30 years ago." But Jerry wasn't finished. He flipped to another page, his voice growing louder with each word. "Jerry's out of town again for that stupid conference. Maybe I'll invite Greg over tonight. He's been texting me all week, and I'm so lonely. Jerry never has to know, right? What he doesn't know won't hurt him." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Janet pressed her hand to her mouth, memories flooding back. Memories she'd buried so deep she'd almost convinced herself they were just fantasies. "There's more," Jerry said, his voice breaking. "So much more. Page after page of you bragging about cheating on me with different men while we were engaged. While I was working 60-hour weeks to save money for our wedding." He flipped through the pages with rough movements, reading random excerpts that grew more incriminating with each revelation. "I can't believe I'm the type to be with two different guys in one day, but here I am. Morning with Tommy, evening with Mike. The thrill is incredible. Sometimes I wonder if I'm doing the right thing, but I'm not hurting anyone, right? Jerry doesn't need to know. Once we're married, I'll settle down." Each word was like a dagger through Jerry's heart. Janet watched her husband of 3 decades crumble before her eyes, his face cycling through disbelief, rage, and something that looked like grief. "Jerry," she whispered, tears starting to form. "That was a lifetime ago. I was young and stupid and—" "Stupid!" Jerry slammed the diary shut. "You think reading about how my own wife was screwing around with God knows how many men while I was planning our future together is just stupid?" Janet's fear morphed into defensive anger. She'd spent 30 years being the perfect wife, the perfect mother. She wasn't going to let him tear her down over ancient history. "I'm not that person anymore," she snapped, crossing her arms. "I was 22 years old, Jerry. 22! People make mistakes." "Mistakes?" Jerry's laugh was bitter and hollow. "You wrote about hooking up with 5 different guys in 1 week. 5! While wearing the engagement ring I saved for 6 months to buy—" The basement walls seemed to close in around them. Janet could hear her own heartbeat pounding in her ears like a war drum. "Look, it happened, okay? But it's done." "You can't change the past," she said, mustering all the dismissive attitude she could manage while panic rioted in her chest. Jerry stared at her for a long moment, then walked over to another box and started rummaging through it. "And you kept these, too," he said, pulling out a stack of old Polaroid photographs. I'm starting to wonder if you enjoyed remembering every filthy detail. Janet's heart nearly stopped when she saw what he was holding. She'd completely forgotten about those photos, pictures that should have been destroyed decades ago. Jerry held up one photograph and his face went white. Who, he said slowly, are these men? The photo showed Janet at what looked like a college party, wearing a tight crop top and short skirt, surrounded by 5 different guys. Each man had his arm around her in a possessive way, and Janet's own expression was one of pure excitement. Her hair was disheveled, her lipstick smeared, and the look in her eyes suggested a wild night. Across the bottom of the photo, someone had written in black marker, "Best night ever." "Oh, please, Jerry, that's from some random party," Janet said, but there was no denying what the photo suggested. The men weren't just random party guests. They had the familiar closeness of intimate partners. It doesn't mean anything. Doesn't mean anything? Jerry's voice was barely audible. Then why did you keep it? Why would you save a photo like this unless it meant something to you? Janet shrugged, though the gesture came off as weak and twitchy. I forgot I even had it. Jerry let the photo fall from his fingers like it had burned him. Get out! What? I said get out! His voice echoed off the basement walls. Pack your things and get out of my house! Janet felt her world tilting sideways. You can't just kick me out! I live here too. Not anymore. Jerry's calmness was more terrifying than his shouting had been. Not until I figure out what to do with all of this. He gestured at the diary and photographs scattered on the floor. Do you have any idea how humiliating this is? For 30 years, I believed I was married to someone honest, someone faithful, someone real. Janet rolled her eyes, her anger flaring. My God, Jerry, if our marriage was such a lie, then why did we have such a good life together? Why did we raise 2 beautiful children? Did we have a good life? Jerry interrupted, his voice trembling. Or did you just get bored with cheating and decide I was the safe option? That's exactly what I'm talking about. Janet threw her hands up in exasperation. You're blowing everything out of proportion. So I had a wild phase when I was younger. Big deal. People change. Jerry's expression hardened into something Janet had never seen before. Pack your things, or I'll pack them for you. Janet wanted to keep arguing, but something in Jerry's eyes told her he was deadly serious. She turned and headed upstairs, her mind racing. This was insane. After 30 years of marriage, he was going to throw it all away because of some ancient history. Why did he have to go snooping around in the basement anyway? While she threw clothes into a suitcase, she could hear Jerry pacing in the hallway outside their bedroom. Just before she zipped up her bag, she spotted their family photo on the nightstand. Jerry, herself, and their 2 adult children, all smiling and wearing matching Christmas sweaters. They looked so perfect, so happy. She picked up the photo and whispered, He'll calm down. He has to. But when she emerged from the bedroom, Jerry was standing by the front door with an expression like granite. This is ridiculous, Janet said as she dragged her suitcase toward the car. You're going to regret this. Jerry swallowed hard but didn't respond. As she drove away, Janet looked in the rearview mirror to see him still standing there, the diary clutched in his hand. In that moment, she hated him almost as much as she hated herself. Word spreads fast in a town of 3,600 people. By the time Janet reached her parents' house 20 minutes later, her phone was already buzzing with messages. He's at Murphy's bar telling everyone what he found, read a text from her friend Linda. Are you okay? Janet cursed under her breath. So Jerry wasn't just wounded. He was humiliating her in public, airing their dirty laundry for the whole town to hear. Her parents, both in their 80s, looked shocked and confused as Janet explained through gritted teeth that Jerry had found some old diaries and was overreacting to affairs she'd had before they were married. But, sweetheart, her mother said, confusion evident in her voice, if it was before you were married, why is he so upset? It's complicated, Mom, Janet muttered, not wanting to reveal the part about multiple men or the fact that some of it had overlapped with their engagement. She definitely wasn't going to mention the explicit photo with 5 men. Meanwhile, Jerry was having video calls with both their adult children, telling them everything. Everything. Within hours, Janet's daughter Sarah was calling, her voice shaking with anger and confusion. How could you do that to Dad? Sarah demanded. Cheating on him with who knows how many men while you were engaged. That's disgusting, Mom. Janet bristled, an indignant flush rising to her cheeks. Watch your tone with me, young lady. Oh, so now you're going to play the stern mother card? You can't hide behind mom mode anymore. Not after what you did. Dad showed us copies of those diary pages. He literally scanned them and sent them to us. You wrote about hooking up with 5 men in the same week while you were engaged to him. Janet's grip tightened on her phone. It wasn't. I mean, it's taken out of context, and it was decades ago. You lied to him, Sarah's voice cracked. You lied to all of us. God, Mom, I always looked up to you. I can't believe I'm saying this, but right now I'm disgusted. The line went dead. Janet's son, Michael, was barely speaking to her either, sending only short, cold text messages when she tried to reach out. Her perfect family was falling apart, and it was all because Jerry couldn't let the past stay buried. A few days later, Janet tried to salvage her relationship with her children, especially Sarah, who was still barely speaking to her. But then the final bombshell dropped. Sarah called one afternoon, her voice eerily calm, too calm. "Mom," she said, "I sent off for one of those DNA tests." Janet's blood turned to ice. The memory of those diary entries flashed through her mind. She'd written about being with multiple men around the same time she and Jerry had gotten engaged. The timeline had always been uncomfortably close to Sarah's conception, but Janet had never allowed herself to think about it seriously. "What are you talking about?" Janet asked, her throat suddenly dry. "A simple DNA test. I've been wanting to do one for genealogy research anyway, but you know what else it shows, right?" Janet bit her lip. "Honey, you're being irrational. Those at-home tests aren't even that accurate." "They're accurate enough," Sarah's voice hardened. "Besides, Dad agreed to do one, too. We'll compare the results and see if we match." Janet closed her eyes, the world spinning around her. "All right," she whispered. "You go ahead and do that." The wait for results felt like an eternity. Each day was more agonizing than the last. Janet prayed she was just being paranoid, that Jerry was indeed Sarah's biological father. Because if he wasn't... The results came on a Tuesday afternoon while Janet was helping her mother with grocery shopping. She felt her phone vibrate, saw Sarah's name, and answered with trembling fingers. "Mom!" Sarah's voice was shaking. "The results came back. It says Dad isn't my biological father." Janet's heart shattered. For a moment, she couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. She felt faint. "Oh my God," Sarah continued, her voice rising to near hysteria. "It's true, isn't it? My entire life is a lie. Dad is not my biological father. All this time." "Did you know?" Janet let out a choked sob. I suspected, but I wasn't sure. I thought I might just be overthinking." "You suspected?" Sarah screamed. "And you never told him? You let him raise me thinking I was his daughter?" "I'm sorry," Janet cried, feeling dizzy. "I'm so sorry, honey." "Dad's packing his things right now," Sarah said through her tears. "He's leaving, moving to Florida to live near his parents. He says he can't stay in this town anymore, can't look at either of us without being reminded of your lies." "You have to talk to him," Janet pleaded. "Make him understand." "Understand what? That my mother is a liar and a cheat? That the man who raised me, who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and walked me down the aisle at my wedding, isn't actually my father?" The line went dead again. Janet drove back to the house she'd once shared with Jerry, feeling defiant and terrified in equal measure. When she walked in, she found Jerry standing in their living room, his eyes red from what looked like a combination of anger and tears. "You have some nerve showing up here," he said quietly. "I need my things," Janet said, tossing her hair back in a defensive gesture. Jerry's bitter laugh echoed through the emptiness of their home. "Yeah, well, you might want to take all your things because I'm moving." "Officially," Janet froze. "What about us?" "There is no us, Janet. There never really was there? You lied about everything. You cheated before we got married. You carried on like some kind of... I don't even want to say it out loud. And now we find out that Sarah isn't even biologically mine." A swirl of conflicting emotions twisted in Janet's stomach. Part of her wanted to fight, to say it was all so long ago that it shouldn't matter. But the DNA test had just destroyed the last fragment of Jerry's illusions about their marriage. "Jerry," she managed, swallowing hard, "I was young. I didn't know who the father was. I loved you and I still do. That's why I married you instead of running off with those other guys. Besides, you raised Sarah. You're her father in every way that matters. Jerry's eyes flared with fresh anger. Every way that matters? Jesus, Janet, you let me believe she was mine. We read bedtime stories together every night for years. I taught her how to ride a bike, how to drive a car. I paid for her college tuition, walked her down the aisle at her wedding, and you didn't have the decency to tell me there was even a chance she might not be mine? Janet took a step toward him, arms outstretched. I was protecting you. And her. She sees you as her dad, Jerry. That's what matters. Jerry shook his head slowly. Protecting me. The bitterness in his voice was like acid. That's rich. Do you realize how messed up that is? You decided on my behalf that I shouldn't know the truth. You played God with my life, with my emotions, with my entire sense of reality. She tried to touch him, but he recoiled. Don't, he said firmly. Don't even try. The only reason you came back here was probably to scrounge for pity or to try to salvage your reputation. Janet's anger flared. Oh, I'm arrogant? You're the one telling the whole town about this, humiliating me in front of everyone I know. Good, Jerry snapped, his voice rising. You deserve to be humiliated for the lies you told, for turning our entire life into a joke. Janet clenched her fists. Well, guess what, Jerry? You're not exactly a saint here, airing our dirty laundry all over town. You think you're so high and mighty? Jerry looked like he might explode, but then he forced himself to exhale. With surprising calm, he said, Leave, now. She hesitated, but he pointed to the door. Leave, or so help me, I'll call the police and say you're trespassing. Janet's mouth twitched. She knew he wasn't bluffing. Though she wanted to stay and keep fighting, she turned and walked out, slamming the door behind her. As soon as she got in her car, she broke down sobbing. Why are you crying? She asked herself through the tears. You did this. You did all of it. In a town of only 3,600 people, Janet's scandal became the talk of every diner, grocery store, and coffee shop. People whispered when she went out in public. Some gave her pitying looks, others offered disapproving glares. She tried to ignore the murmurs. Did you hear about Janet? Turns out her daughter isn't Jerry's. I heard she was hooking up with 5 guys at once back in the day. Supposedly, there's a photo so scandalous that one day she overheard a pair of women in the cereal aisle discussing how Jerry was. Definitely leaving for Florida and how Janet was getting what she deserved. She couldn't take it anymore. She abandoned her cart and fled to the parking lot. Her phone buzzed. It was her mother, frantic. Janet, get back here. Jerry's on the phone. He wants to talk to you. Janet rushed home, heart pounding. Was it possible Jerry had calmed down enough to speak rationally? When she walked into her parents' living room, she found Jerry on speakerphone, the tension in the air thick as storm clouds. Janet. Jerry's voice came through, sounding exhausted. I need a favor. She couldn't believe her ears. A favor? Jerry sighed. Yes, I've had enough of this town, this situation, everything. I'm leaving for Florida next week. I need you to sign some papers so we can move forward with a legal separation. Janet's stomach twisted. A separation? Jerry, don't do this. Sign them, he interrupted. Or I'll file for divorce without any negotiation and you'll get nothing. Her parents exchanged horrified glances. Janet pressed her palms to her temples, frustration boiling over. So that's how you're going to play it? You leave me high and dry after 32 years of marriage? Jerry gave a short, harsh laugh. Actually, you left me high and dry the moment you decided it was fine to cheat on me and lie about it for 3 decades. So sign the papers or I'll do this the hard way. Janet bit back a retort, tears burning at the back of her eyes. Fine. Send them over. A few weeks passed with minimal contact between them. Janet retreated deeper into bitter gloom, ignoring phone calls from nosy acquaintances. Then she heard from a reliable source that Jerry had been seen around town with Susie Patterson, the ex-wife of David, one of the men mentioned in Janet's diary. The rumor made Janet seethe with jealousy and anger. How dare they? He's doing exactly what I did, she muttered, pacing her childhood bedroom at her parents' house. Only difference is he's flaunting it in front of the whole town. He wants me to suffer. In truth, Jerry had every right to see whomever he wanted. They were separated, after all. But the thought of him getting close to Susie, bonding over their mutual heartbreak caused by Janet and David, tore Janet up inside. It felt like a cosmic twist of the knife. Her phone vibrated with a message from an unknown number. You reap what you sow. Susie. Janet stared at the text, her blood boiling. I'm not going to engage, she told herself, even as she felt the urge to hurl her phone against the wall. But she typed out a reply anyway. Leave me alone. You have no business in my marriage. A minute later, the response came. It's not your marriage anymore, sweetie. He deserves better. Janet hissed in fury, but forced herself to stop responding. They can have each other, she thought, though her heart panged with regret. On a cold Sunday morning in March, Janet decided to return to her house one last time before Jerry officially moved to Florida. She wanted to attempt some kind of closure, maybe beg him to keep the lines of communication open. She also harbored a tiny flicker of hope that he might realize their bond was stronger than these ancient mistakes. The driveway was half full of moving boxes. Jerry was supervising his friend Tom, who was helping him load everything into a rental truck. As soon as Jerry spotted Janet's car, his expression hardened. Why are you here? He said, walking up to her before she'd even shut her car door. The wind whipped at his hair, revealing deeper lines on his face, lines of stress, heartbreak, maybe even hate. She stepped out, ignoring Tom's curious stare. Oh, we need to talk. Alone. Jerry stiffened, then nodded curtly to Tom. Give us a minute. Inside the house, they entered the living room, which looked devastatingly bare with all the furniture gone. Cardboard boxes lined the walls. The couch they'd cuddled on for years was already loaded in the truck. Jerry crossed his arms. Say what you need to say. Janet swallowed hard. Jerry, please. I know I messed up, okay? And I'm sorry. But we've had 32 years together. 32 years of marriage. That should count for something. I made stupid, horrible choices when I was younger, but I've been faithful ever since. You know that. Jerry snorted. Actually, I don't know that, considering how well you hid this side of yourself for 3 decades. She took a step closer, ignoring his derisive tone. Look, let's be honest. Sarah might not be your biological child, but you're the only father she's ever known. She loves you. And so do I. A muscle in Jerry's jaw twitched. Yeah, well, you should have thought about that before lying to me for 32 years. Janet's voice hitched. It was a mistake. I'm not the same person I was back then. Don't throw away everything we built together. Jerry stared at her for a long moment, then shook his head slowly. You know, a few months ago, I might have listened to you. But after reading those diaries, after seeing that photo... They're old, Janet interjected, tears brimming. Stop acting like I cheated on you yesterday. Jerry raised his voice. It doesn't matter if it was 30 years ago or 30 seconds ago. You let me believe I was marrying someone pure, loyal, honest. All that time, you had this enormous skeleton in your closet, or should I say a whole graveyard of skeletons. David, Greg, Eddie, Mike, Tommy, and God knows who else. And that photo with the 5 men... He shuddered. I can't unsee that. Janet's face twisted with shame for a split second, but she quickly hardened again. You're unbelievable. I can't change the past, Jerry. Exactly, he replied, his voice dropping to a near whisper. And I can't change how I feel about you now. Janet's bravado cracked, tears spilling down her cheeks. So that's it? You're really leaving me? Jerry nodded. We're already divorced in every way that matters. The legal process will just catch up soon enough. I have no reason to stay in this house, this town, this state. I'm done. She clasped her hands together, desperately. Please, let's at least talk about therapy. Maybe we can work through this. No, he said, finality lacing the single word. I won't spend the rest of my life wondering if you've done it again. I can't look at you without picturing them, without wondering what else you've lied about. Janet's shoulders slumped, defeat washing over her. So you'd rather run off with Susie or whoever else you've been seeing? Jerry raised an eyebrow. At least Susie isn't hiding any diaries full of secrets. But that's irrelevant to you and me. We're finished, Janet. She felt a flash of rage. You're such a hypocrite. If you're hooking up with her, you know that, right? If you can't forgive me for my past... Jerry cut her off with a bitter laugh. My God, you still don't get it, do you? This isn't about me hooking up with anyone. This is about your fundamental betrayal, your arrogance, and the lies that form the foundation of our entire marriage. If you can't see the difference, then there's truly nothing left to say. They stood in silence for a moment, tension crackling like static electricity in the air. Then Tom poked his head through the front door. Hey, Jerry, sorry to interrupt, but the truck's packed. We should get going soon if we want to make Tampa by evening. Jerry nodded. Right. He grabbed his coat from the floor and walked toward the door without another word. Jerry! Janet called out, her voice pleading. He paused at the threshold but didn't turn around. Goodbye, Janet! And then he was gone. Days turned into weeks. Jerry left for Florida, Sarah moved to Orlando for a new job, and Michael stayed in Atlanta but rarely called. Janet was alone in her parents' house, sleeping in the same small bedroom she'd grown up in, but now haunted by regrets and the ghost of what used to be. She spent her nights scrolling through old photos on her phone, pausing on each image of her and Jerry smiling at barbecues, birthdays, anniversaries. She thought about that fateful day in the basement. If only she had destroyed those diaries. If only she had never written them in the first place. But regrets were useless now. Her phone rang sporadically, mostly from old friends wanting the inside scoop on the scandal. She ignored them all, because no matter how many times she tried to justify or rationalize what had happened, the truth was inescapable. She had caused this, all of it. One late night, she even considered driving down to Florida unannounced, knocking on Jerry's door and begging him one more time. But she knew it would only make things worse, would only add to her humiliation. The man she had loved, the one who had raised a daughter he thought was his own, was gone. Physically, emotionally, completely. She had lost him, and in the process, she had lost herself too. In a moment of desperation, she texted Sarah, I'm so sorry, honey. I love you. I hope someday you can forgive me. Let me know how your new apartment is going. No response. She tried Michael next, leaving a tearful voicemail. Please call me back. I know you're hurting, but I'm hurting too. I love you both more than anything in this world. Still nothing. The silence was deafening. One chilly evening in late spring, Janet's father found her sitting in the dark living room, staring at nothing. He cleared his throat gently. Janet, he began softly, I know this has been a difficult time, but maybe you should consider visiting your children in person. She nodded, tears pooling in her eyes. They won't pick up my calls. I'm a complete pariah now. Her father sighed and placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. You have to understand why they're upset, especially Sarah. Her entire sense of identity has been shattered. Janet bit her lip hard enough to taste blood. I know, and it's all my fault. If only I'd told Jerry the truth from the beginning, maybe we could have... She shook her head, too exhausted to finish the thought. Her father looked at her with sorrow etched in every wrinkle of his face. You might have lost Jerry, he said quietly, but do whatever you can to not lose your children. If that means letting them be angry for a while, you let them. If it means apologizing 1,000,000 times, you do it. Don't let your pride or your resentment get in the way. Janet nodded, burying her face in her hands. I don't know if they'll ever forgive me. He squeezed her shoulder. Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you stop trying. Months passed. Janet found a part-time job at a local boutique, mostly to keep herself from going completely stir-crazy. She lived with her parents, cooking meals for them, cleaning the house, doing whatever she could to distract herself from the emptiness that lurked constantly in her heart. Jerry was somewhere near Tampa, building a new life by the water. The last she'd heard through the small-town grapevine, he was renting a small house with a view of the Gulf. Rumors swirled that he and Susie had grown closer. Some said they were just friends supporting each other through difficult divorces. Others whispered they were lovers. Janet tried not to care, but the thought of him moving on so easily gnawed at her soul. Her children remained distant. The only contact she had was occasional texts from Sarah about practical matters, tax documents, insurance papers, legal stuff related to the divorce. Michael never replied to anything at all. Some nights, Janet lay awake in her childhood twin bed, replaying every moment of her past. She thought about that group photo with the 5 guys, the diary entries where she'd bragged about her conquests while Jerry was working overtime to save money for their wedding, the day she'd discovered she was pregnant, but never seriously. Considered the timeline. It had all seemed so easy to dismiss back then, so simple to say it's in the past and move on. But now she understood that some pasts, no matter how deeply buried, never truly go away. They linger in boxes and diaries and old photographs, hidden in basements like silent landmines, waiting to detonate a lifetime later. As she drifted into restless sleep on her old bed, she could still hear the echo of Jerry's voice. You built our marriage on lies. And maybe, she thought bitterly, maybe he was right. But in her dreams, she'd see the way he used to look at her, with love and trust and genuine affection. The way they'd laugh at little inside jokes. The way they'd take turns driving Sarah to soccer practice. The way they'd slow dance in the kitchen while dinner was cooking. She'd wake with tears on her pillow, the heartbreak fresh each morning, like experiencing the loss all over again. And so life went on, fragmented, lonely, and filled with regrets she'd replay forever. That moment in the basement, Jerry holding the diary, reading those words she'd once thought were meaningless, that moment more than any other had shattered the illusion of her perfect marriage. There was no way to rewrite that story. The truth, once revealed, had destroyed everything in its path. But Janet's story wasn't quite over yet. 6 months after Jerry left for Florida, Janet received an unexpected phone call on a sweltering August afternoon. She was at the boutique, helping an elderly customer choose between two nearly identical floral dresses when her phone rang. The caller ID showed a number she didn't recognize, but something made her step outside to answer it. Janet? This is Tom Richardson, Jerry's friend. Janet's heart skipped. Tom was the one who'd helped Jerry move to Florida. Is Jerry okay? Did something happen? He's fine physically, Tom said, his voice careful. But I thought you should know. He's been asking about you. Janet nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean? Look, I probably shouldn't be calling you, but he's been drinking more than he should. And when he drinks, he talks. About you, about the marriage, about how maybe he was too harsh. Janet's pulse quickened. What exactly has he been saying? Tom was quiet for a moment. He found some letters you wrote him when you were first dating. Love letters, from before all that other stuff happened. He's been reading them over and over, crying like a baby. Janet, I think he's starting to realize that maybe your feelings for him were real, even if you made some terrible choices. Tears sprang to Janet's eyes. Tom, I need to see him. Can you give me his address? I can't do that, Tom said firmly. But I can tell you this. He's not as happy as he pretends to be. That thing with Susie is not serious. I think he's just trying to fill the void. After Tom hung up, Janet stood in the blazing heat outside the boutique, her mind racing. Jerry was having second thoughts. Maybe there was still a chance to fix this, to somehow rebuild what they'd lost. That evening, Janet made a decision that would change everything. She was going to Florida. She didn't tell her parents where she was going. She just said she needed a few days away to think. She threw some clothes in a bag, got in her car, and started driving south. The 12-hour drive gave her plenty of time to plan what she'd say, how she'd approach him, how she'd convince him that their love was worth fighting for. She arrived in Tampa late at night and checked into a cheap motel near the beach. The next morning, she started calling every property management company in the area, pretending to be an old friend trying to reconnect with Jerry. It took 6 hours and dozens of calls, but she finally found him. He was renting a small blue house 3 blocks from the water, with a tiny front yard full of sand and scrub grass. Janet sat in her car across the street for nearly an hour, working up the courage to knock on his door. When she finally did, Jerry's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, anger, confusion, and something that might have been relief. Janet, what the heck are you doing here? We need to talk, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. Really talk. Not through lawyers or over the phone, but face to face. Jerry looked over her shoulder, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. You can't just show up here unannounced. This is my home now. 5 minutes, Janet pleaded. Just give me 5 minutes, and if you want me to leave after that, I'll drive straight back to Ohio and never bother you again. Jerry hesitated, then stepped aside. 5 minutes. His house was sparse but clean, with minimal furniture and boxes still stacked in corners. The living room had a single couch facing a small TV, and through the sliding glass door, Janet could see a tiny patio overlooking a canal. You look good, she said, and meant it. Jerry had lost some weight, and the Florida sun had given him a tan that made him look younger. What do you want, Janet? She took a deep breath. I want to apologize. Really apologize, not just say sorry to make myself feel better. What I did to you, the lying, the cheating, letting you raise Sarah without knowing the truth, it was unforgivable. I see that now. Jerry's expression didn't change. Okay. You've apologized. Now what? I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Do you ever think about the good times, the real times, when it was just us and we were happy? Jerry was quiet for a long moment. Every day, he admitted finally. But that doesn't change what you did. I know, Janet said quickly. I'm not asking you to forget or pretend it didn't happen. I'm asking if you think there's any part of our marriage that was real. Any part of what we had that was worth fighting for. Jerry walked to the sliding door and stared out at the water. Tom called you, didn't he? Janet's cheeks flushed. He was worried about you. He had no right to interfere. Jerry turned back to face her. But since you're here, I'll tell you what I told him. Yes, I miss what we had. Yes, I sometimes wonder if I was too quick to throw it all away. But, Janet, I can't get those images out of my head. Every time I look at you, I see those diary entries, that photo. I think about all the nights I was working late while you were... I know, Janet whispered, and I hate myself for it. But, Jerry, that wasn't who I really was. It was who I was pretending to be because I was scared and insecure and thought that's what I needed to do to be interesting. Jerry's laugh was bitter. Interesting? You thought cheating would make you interesting. I thought it would make me feel wanted, Janet said, tears starting to flow. My parents were always fighting. I had no self-esteem. And when these guys paid attention to me, it felt like I mattered. But it was all fake, Jerry. The only real thing I ever had was what we built together. Jerry sat down heavily on the couch. Even if that's true, even if your feelings for me were real, how do I trust you again? How do I know you won't get bored or scared or insecure and run off with someone else? Janet knelt down in front of him, taking his hands in hers. Because I've spent the last 6 months learning what it feels like to lose everything that matters. I will never, ever risk that again. For a moment, Jerry didn't pull away. Janet could feel the warmth of his skin, smell his familiar cologne, see the conflict in his eyes. But then, he gently removed his hands from hers. It's too late, Janet. Too much has been broken. What about Sarah? Janet asked desperately. She's your daughter in every way that counts. Are you really going to let biology destroy that relationship too? Jerry's face crumpled slightly. I've been trying to call her, but she won't answer. I think she's too embarrassed, too confused about who she is now. Then we fix it together, Janet said. We figure out how to be a family again, even if it's different than before. Jerry shook his head. There is no we anymore. I'm sorry you drove all this way, but my answer is no. I can't do it. Janet felt her last hope crumbling. She stood up slowly, wiping her eyes. Okay, I understand. But Jerry, before I go, I need you to know something. I never stopped loving you. Not for one single day in 32 years. Those other men, they were nothing. Meaningless. You were the only one who ever really mattered. Jerry's eyes filled with tears, but his voice remained firm. I believe you loved me. But love wasn't enough to stop you from betraying me. And it's not enough to fix what's broken now. Janet nodded, defeated. She walked toward the door, then paused. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me. I won't, Jerry said quietly. Janet drove back to Ohio with her heart shattered all over again. But at least now she knew there was no hope left to cling to, no fantasy of reconciliation to torture herself with. Jerry had made his choice, and she would have to learn to live with the consequences of hers. But as Janet would soon discover, Jerry wasn't the only one who had been keeping secrets. 2 weeks after returning from Florida, Janet received a phone call that would change everything yet again. It was from Linda, her former friend, who had been one of the first to text her about Jerry's public revelation at the bar. Janet, we need to talk, Linda said, her voice strange and tense. There's something you need to know about Jerry. About what really happened after you left town. They met at a coffee shop on the outskirts of town, far from prying eyes and gossip-hungry neighbors. Linda looked nervous, fidgeting with her purse and avoiding eye contact. I should have told you this months ago, Linda began, but I was afraid of how you'd react. Told me what? Linda took a deep breath. Jerry didn't just tell people about your diaries. He showed them. The actual pages, the photographs, everything. He made copies and passed them around like some kind of sick revenge tour. Janet felt the blood drain from her face. What do you mean, pass them around? I mean, he went to every bar, every coffee shop, every gathering he could find, and he showed people the most intimate details of your past. Janet, half the town has seen that photo of you with those 5 men. Everyone knows exactly what you wrote in those diaries, word for word. Janet's hands began to shake. But he said he was just telling people we were getting divorced because of infidelity. He went way beyond that, Linda interrupted. He was systematic about it, methodical. Like he wanted to make sure your reputation was completely destroyed before he left town. The coffee shop suddenly felt too hot, too small. Janet could barely breathe. Why are you telling me this now? Linda finally looked her in the eye. Because what he did was cruel and vindictive, and you deserve to know the truth. Yes, you made mistakes 30 years ago. But what Jerry did was deliberate character assassination. Janet sat in stunned silence, processing this revelation. All this time, she'd thought Jerry's pain and anger were justified, that his public disclosure was just the reaction of a hurt husband. But this sounded like something else entirely. Calculated revenge. There's more, Linda said quietly. After he left for Florida, some of us started talking, really talking, and we realized that Jerry wasn't exactly the saint he pretended to be during your marriage. What do you mean? Do you remember Karen Walsh? She used to work at the bank with Jerry. Janet nodded. Karen had been at several office parties over the years, a quiet woman with dark hair and a shy smile. She finally admitted that she and Jerry had an affair. It lasted almost 2 years, from 2018 to 2020. Janet felt like she'd been slapped. That's impossible. Jerry would never... She has text messages, Janet. Hotel receipts. Photos of them together on business trips that weren't actually business trips. The room began to spin. 2018 to 2020. That was recent. That was during their marriage, when Janet had been completely faithful, when she'd thought they were happy. But that's not even the worst part, Linda continued. Karen wasn't the only one. There was also Jessica from his gym, and apparently someone named Michelle, who works for one of his clients. Janet, your husband was a serial cheater, and he was just better at hiding it than you were 30 years ago. Janet gripped the edge of the table to steady herself. How do you know all this? Because after Jerry left town, these women started talking. They felt guilty about what happened, especially after seeing how he destroyed you publicly. Karen said Jerry told her that you were cold and distant, that your marriage was basically over anyway. He made them all believe they were saving him from an unhappy relationship. Rage, unlike anything Janet had ever felt, began building in her chest. All those months of self-blame, of accepting that she deserved everything that happened to her, of believing she was the villain in their story, and Jerry had been doing the exact same thing. But worse. Linda, I need you to help me get in touch with these women, all of them. Linda looked alarmed. Janet, what are you planning to do? I'm going to do exactly what Jerry did to me, Janet said, her voice ice cold. I'm going to make sure everyone knows the truth about the real Jerry. Over the next 2 weeks, Janet systematically contacted every woman Linda had mentioned. Karen was the most forthcoming, perhaps because her guilt was the strongest. She met Janet at a restaurant the next evening and brought a box full of evidence. I'm so sorry, Karen said, tears in her eyes as she slid the box across the table. I had no idea he was going to humiliate you like that. When I saw what he did, how he shared your private moments with the whole town, I realized what kind of man he really was. Janet opened the box and found hundreds of text messages between Karen and Jerry, photos of them together on romantic. Getaways, hotel receipts from trips that Jerry had told Janet were for work. The messages were explicit, romantic, and recent, some dated just months before Jerry found Janet's diary. He told me you two hadn't been intimate in years, Karen said. He said you were like roommates, that you'd grown apart. I never would have gotten involved if I'd known he was lying. Janet scrolled through the messages, her anger growing with each sweet word Jerry had written to another woman while coming home to her every night, pretending to be the perfect husband. What about the others? Jessica has photos too. They went to Miami together last spring. Jerry told you it was a work conference, remember? And Michelle said he bought her jewelry, took her to expensive restaurants. Janet, he was living a double life. That night, Janet spread all the evidence across her childhood bedroom floor. Photos of Jerry kissing other women, receipts for romantic dinners and hotel rooms, text messages where he professed love to multiple women simultaneously. The scale of his deception was breathtaking. But it was one particular text message that pushed Janet over the edge. It was from Jerry to Karen, dated just 2 weeks before he found the diary. Can't wait to figure out how to get rid of Janet permanently. She's getting suspicious about my trips. Maybe I should start picking fights with her. Make her think the marriage is falling apart so when I leave, it won't be a surprise. You're the only woman I've ever really loved? Janet stared at the message, reading it over and over. Jerry hadn't stumbled upon her diary by accident. He'd been looking for a reason to leave her, an excuse that would make him look like the victim instead of the cheater. The next morning, Janet began her own systematic campaign. But unlike Jerry's cruel public humiliation, Janet had a more strategic approach in mind. She started by creating copies of all the evidence, just as Jerry had done with her diary. Then she began making phone calls, not to gossips and bartenders, but to people who mattered. Jerry's boss, his clients, his parents. "Mr. Morrison," she said when Jerry's supervisor answered the phone. "This is Janet, Jerry's wife. I think there are some things about Jerry's recent business trips that you should know about." She sent him copies of the hotel receipts, the photos of Jerry with Karen and Jessica on trips that were supposed to be work-related, the text messages, where Jerry bragged about using company money to wine and dine his mistresses. Jerry's parents were next. She called his mother and, in the sweetest voice she could manage, said, "Mrs. Patterson, I thought you should know what your son has really been up to. I have some photos and messages I think you'll find very interesting." She sent them everything. The evidence of Jerry's affairs, his plan to get rid of her permanently, the messages where he mocked his parents as old-fashioned idiots who would never understand his needs. Then Janet called every single one of Jerry's clients, the ones whose trust and respect he'd spent years building. She didn't have to say much. She just sent them the evidence and let them draw their own conclusions about Jerry's character and integrity. But Janet's masterstroke was her call to the Tampa Tribune. "I have a story about a man who publicly humiliated his wife for 30-year-old infidelities while carrying on multiple affairs of his own," she told the reporter. "I have documentation, photos, and recorded conversations. I think your readers would find it very interesting." The story ran 3 days later with the headline, "Ohio Man's Revenge Campaign Backfires When His Own Affairs Are Exposed." It included photos of Jerry with his various mistresses, excerpts from his text messages, and a detailed timeline showing how he'd been cheating throughout the final years of their marriage while planning to leave Janet anyway. The article went viral. Within hours, Jerry's phone was ringing off the hook. His boss fired him immediately. His clients began terminating their contracts. His parents called, screaming about the humiliation he'd brought on the family name. But the best part was yet to come. Janet's phone rang at 6 a.m. the next morning. It was Jerry, and he was furious. "What the heck have you done?" he screamed into the phone. "Good morning to you too, Jerry," Janet said calmly. "I take it you've seen the newspaper? You destroyed my life. I can't show my face anywhere in this town. My clients are dropping me. My parents won't speak to me. I'm a laughingstock." Janet's voice was ice cold. "Now you know exactly how I felt when you decided to share my private diary with half of Ohio. That's different. What you did was real infidelity during our engagement. And what you did was real infidelity during our marriage," Janet shot back. "Plus, you were planning to leave me anyway. You used my diary as an excuse to make yourself look like the victim instead of the cheater you really were." Jerry was quiet for a moment. "How did you find out about Karen?" "The same way you found out about my past, people talk. The difference is, your affairs were recent, Jerry. While I was being faithful to you, while I was taking care of your parents when they were sick, while I was supporting you through your career changes, you were screwing around with multiple women and planning your escape. I want those photos back. I want you to call that newspaper and tell them you lied." Janet laughed, actually laughed. "Or what? You'll divorce me? You'll leave me? Jerry, you already did the worst you could do. You have no power over me anymore." "Janet, please." "This is destroying me." "Good," she said simply. "You destroyed me first. The only difference is I deserved it less." She hung up the phone and, for the first time in months, felt genuinely at peace. The aftermath was swift and decisive. Jerry's business collapsed within a week. His relationship with Susie ended when she learned about his multiple other affairs. His reputation in Tampa was ruined before he'd even had a chance to establish one. Meanwhile, back in Ohio, public opinion about Janet began to shift. People who had whispered about her past now whispered about Jerry's hypocrisy. The narrative changed from Jerry was betrayed by his cheating wife to Jerry was a vindictive cheater who got what he deserved. Most importantly, Sarah and Michael both reached out to Janet. "Mom," Sarah said when she called, "I saw the article. I can't believe Dad did all that while judging you for things that happened before I was even born." "I'm not saying what I did was right," Janet replied carefully. "But I'm glad you know the whole story now." "I want to see you," Sarah said. "I think we have a lot to talk about." Michael was more direct. "Dad's a hypocrite and a fraud. I'm sorry I took his side without knowing all the facts." 6 months later, Janet was no longer living with her parents. She'd used the publicity from Jerry's scandal to land a better job at a marketing firm in Columbus, where her story was seen as evidence of her resilience rather than her shame. Jerry, meanwhile, had moved back to Ohio with his tail between his legs, taking a low-paying job at a small firm and living in a studio apartment. His social circle had evaporated, his professional reputation was in ruins, and his relationship with his children was permanently damaged. One evening, as Janet was finishing dinner with Sarah and her grandchildren, her phone rang. It was Jerry. "Janet," he said, his voice small and defeated. "I need to ask you something." "What is it, Jerry?" Is there any chance we could try again?" "Start over?" Janet looked around her new life, her successful career, her rebuilt relationship with her children, her self-respect restored. Then she thought about Jerry's systematic campaign to destroy her, his years of cheating, his calculated cruelty. "No, Jerry," she said firmly. "There isn't. But I thought, after everything that's happened, maybe you'd understand that we both made mistakes." "We didn't both make mistakes," Janet interrupted. "I made mistakes 30 years ago when I was young and stupid. You made deliberate choices as a grown man to betray our marriage and then to destroy me publicly when it suited your purposes. Those aren't equivalent." "I'm sorry," Jerry whispered. "I'm so sorry for everything." "I know you are. But sorry doesn't fix this. Some things, once broken, can't be repaired." Janet hung up the phone and returned to dinner with her family. Outside, the sun was setting over Columbus, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and pink. It was beautiful, peaceful, and most importantly, it was hers. For the first time in her adult life, Janet was exactly where she belonged,